Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. We have about 35 attendees right now. I expect that will grow as we saw with our previous session earlier this week. So my name is Jim G. I'm Assistant Director for Communication at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, and I'm also doing communication work for the Next LMS project. So welcome to our second Q&A session of the week. We're talking about replacing ReggieNet, our current LMS, which is based on Sakai here on campus. And today we have guests from Brightspace D2L, which is one of the two candidate products that we're looking at to actually replace ReggieNet. We want this to be a discussion, so we're going to do something similar to what we did earlier this week. I'm going to ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves so we can put some names to faces and voices. I'm going to take care of a little housekeeping to talk a little bit more about the project itself and how we will be going along. And also I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to be operating in this kind of different version of Zoom than you may be used to. We're using a webinar flavor of Zoom today. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Charles Bristow from the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, who's going to actually talk a little bit about how Brightspace D2L compares to ReggieNet. And, you know, for those of you who don't know Charles, you're going to hear from him here in a moment. So we are using the Q&A function today. So the chat is not available to chat with each other. You can ask a question of the hosts if you're having a technical problem, but we're going to actually ask that you hit that Q&A button and use that today instead. So let me quickly go around and I'm going to let people introduce themselves. So again, my name is Jim and I'm with the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. I do faculty support there. I do communication work. I also teach part-time in the School of Communication. So I've used ReggieNet for a long time from a teaching standpoint. Charles, would you please introduce yourself?
Charles Bristow. I work at CTLT. I'm the lead for our faculty support group for NET and what will soon become our new LMS.
Okay, thank you. Jen, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jen Bethman. I'm the Web Accessibility Coordinator. I'm out of Technology Solutions, the web team, and I work at reviewing digital technology for assistive technology, accessibility best practices, and making sure that our digital spaces are available to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. And as I mentioned, we have a couple of friends here today, 3 of them actually, from Brightspace D2L. Ashley, why don't we begin with you?
Yes, thank you. Great to meet you all. Good afternoon. I'm Ashley McDonald. I am your Senior Account Executive with D2L Brightspace. So great to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. Scott?
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Bowden. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer here at D2L. So my role is to help support from a technical and platform perspective. So happy to be here and hear all the questions we have today.
Great. And last but not least, Jake, and it's Heimpel, isn't it?
Yeah, that's perfect, Jim. Well done. And so, hi, everyone. My name is Jake Heimpel. I lead D2L's higher ed partnership team here at D2L. I've been with D2L for about 10 years now, so it's been a pleasure working with ISU today, and we're happy to answer as many questions as you have.
Great. Well, thank you, Jake. And I'll let a little secret out. I asked Scott earlier how to pronounce your name, so there we go. So everyone, again, welcome to our discussion. I want to go over very briefly, and this will take like a minute or two. I want to first remind you that this website's very important to this project. It's Next LMS, all one word, .illinoisstate.edu, nextlms.illinoisstate.edu. You may have visited it already today in order to get the link. We do have the recording link. If you missed the Tuesday session, that has already been posted here. We will do the same thing probably by tomorrow morning for this one. So if you have friends who haven't been able to attend or colleagues that haven't been able to attend, you will see a link to watch the recording. And actually by Monday or Tuesday next week, we will have more robust pages built out for both of the products that we're looking at, which will not only include this recording. Ashley and her colleagues were kind enough to send us some other demonstration videos, especially about what the student experience looks like in Brightspace. And we'll link to some other web pages, some information about accessibility on both platforms. So stay tuned for that. But that's an important website to keep in mind. I do want to briefly touch upon, and as we did last time, the timetable of what we're looking at. There is an advisory group, and you can read more about that on the website, and a technology group. And both of these groups are planning to come together the second week of May, so fairly soon, and see if we can make a recommendation to the administration on which platform to move forward with in terms of a pilot test. So we're hoping to make that decision in a few weeks, certainly by the end of May. And then we would begin pilot testing in the fall of 2022. That would mean that we would have just a small group of faculty and the students enrolled in one or more of their classes and ask them to test drive the system. So we'll learn better how it works. We'll learn what support material and what kind of support we need to create and what sort of policies need to put in place to use the new learning management system, you know, in terms of like templates and how courses are created and stuff like that. That would continue in the spring, and we would also take what we learned from the fall and begin the process, I should say, and hopefully make progress in moving data out of ReggieNet and into the new learning management system. And if all goes well, and we have no reason to believe it won't, we would have the total switch over from ReggieNet to the new learning management system in time for the fall of 2023. So that is a brief look at the timetable. I'd be happy to answer more detailed questions about that if you have them, but I'm going to right now stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask my colleague Charles to take over to give us a little tour of Brightspace D2L compared to ReggieNet. And again, if you have questions as Charles is going along, please hit that Q&A button. You can jump in and ask a question. You do have the option, by the way, of submitting questions anonymously. You're more than welcome to do that. Keep in mind, though, if it's a very complicated, intricate question that we may need to go research, and we found we've had to do that with the last session. If you are anonymous, it may be hard for us to follow up with you. So just throwing that out there. Charles, I'll let you share your screen and take it away.
All right. Good afternoon again. And let me find the right button to share screen. So we'll just take a quick look at the D2L space, just to give you a little bit of a feel for what it looks like and how it's a little bit different from ReggieNet. And then we'll go ahead and open things up for questions, because we want to leave as much time for that as possible. As I said at the other session, I'm an administrator, so this might look a little bit different from what a typical instructor might see. But we have, similar to what we saw on Tuesday, we have tiles for our courses. So I can go ahead and they're divided up by terms, whatnot. So I can select my course. There's an announcement showing. You can also set a home page. I haven't done it for this one. One of the big differences you'll see in this versus ReggieNet, the main menu runs across the top of the page rather than down the left-hand side. So there are advantages and disadvantages of that. It takes a little getting used to, but it does give you more space to work in down below. So it's a toss-up whether some people like that or not, but that is the way it is. We've got updates. We've got various ways of shortcuts to accessing material. Another kind of thing that's fairly different from ReggieNet is what's called content. This is where basically content will go, and you can add links to documents. So I have a document that will show as a preview. I could have just hit the next button. You can link to quizzes, assignment. I've embedded a video here. You can put in a checklist. So similar to what we saw on Tuesday, this is the way to provide content for your students. And
Charles,
I can go
Charles,
ahead
if I can interrupt really quickly.
add some things. Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to suggest that while you're sharing your screen that you turn off your camera. We're getting a little bit of lag once in a while. Your audio is kind of coming unsynced, and I think it might be a bandwidth issue. So carry on. Thank you.
It could be. Sure. No problem. Most of the other basic tools are similar to what we have in ReggieNet. We have assignments. we have, so I've got one assignment here. We've got discussions. We can do quizzes. There is what's called the question library. That's to question pools. We have our class list. We have grades. So we can set up our gradebook. We can manage grades. We can set up our schemes. There's even a nice little setup wizard that will kind of walk you through the process of getting your gradebook set up. There are more course tools listed here. And actually, if you go into all course tools, there's all kinds of things that you can do within the system that aren't initially obvious. Help is always available. And again, we can go in and edit our profile and do things like that. So that's kind of the very basic overview of the D2L space. Not sure if we've gotten any questions in yet.
We have not, but I do have one question. Could you go over a little bit more? You know, we've had discussions. We had discussions in the last session about where grades are entered and how grades are controlled. What is the gradebook just a place to?
Nope. In this
stuff?
case, the gradebook setup is all through the gradebook itself. I can enter grades here directly. If I go into what's called spreadsheet view, there's also a standard view, which kind of just shows all the kind of the overall grades. In this case, right now, it's displaying in percentages. I'm pretty certain that can be changed. And there's settings for the gradebook as well. So I can do a number of things here. One of the pluses I like about D2 under the class list, I can go to an individual and actually set an overall exception for all quizzes in the course that allow them to have extra time. So if you have accommodations, then that you can set that automatically for all quizzes for a particular student, and you don't have to go in and set an exception for each individual quiz. You can say, okay, this student gets 1.5 times the regular time. So that's kind of nice.
So we're starting to get some questions in. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Charles. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yep. And I was going to pass this one off to the D2L folks. Does D2L have a dark mode?
Actually, or
Yeah.
Scott?
That's a great question. So the mobile app of Brightspace called Pulse currently includes a dark mode or high contrast mode. The platform on laptop that we're seeing today doesn't currently, but it is something that we're working on to improve that high contrast visibility. So yes, for mobile, not currently for desktop.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. And for our friends from D2L, you're welcome to jump into the Q&A section and start answering questions if you want to. And then even after you put an answer in, we can also highlight those as part of our discussion here, kind of live on the air, as it were. So Charles, I'm going to ask you to answer, see if you can address Eli's question. Is there something similar to ReggieNet's weekly lessons?
Right. That's the content tool. So I've created one called Next LMS. I could have just as easily called it week 1, week 2, etc. And this is where I can provide content to students.
Okay. And can you show us again a little bit more about the different types of content we can have?
So I can create a file. I can create a link. I can also put in assignments, checklists, discussion, quiz, surveys. So similar to the lessons tool in ReggieNet, we can provide content, we can provide links to documents, we can embed videos, and then provide links to other items within our course.
I'm presuming that the ability in ReggieNet's lesson pages to have columns on a lesson page, because mine, for example, is set up for 2 columns. Is that available in the LMSs we've looked at, or is that kind of a passe function? Because I know that makes the mobile experience a little wonky sometimes.
No, that's not something that's available, at least as far as I know.
So we,
one thing I just wanted to add from a content perspective, sorry, Jake, is when you're adding in content into Brightspace, it's really simple to just drag and drop everything you have, and that will include all content items you've created, like Word documents and PowerPoints and PDFs. So, Charles showed the ability to just go into upload and add content that way, but you can also just drag and drop right from your desktop into the content area of Brightspace. So it makes it really easy to bring in everything you got, including your multimedia.
Great.
then-
Scott, I see that you, oh, okay, go ahead, Jake, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jim. I was just going to add that from some of the other institutions that have migrated from Sakai, we've heard that, several column layout approach come up before. So there's kind of a unique aspect of Brightspace where you can structure your course content into different layouts. And there's a really nice, easy way to do so. So under that upload and create option, if you then click on create a file, we have this concept in Brightspace called document templates. ISU and your teaching and learning staff can create these. And when you click on these templates, there can be different layouts, and it helps also improve both the accessibility of this course content, but also the mobile responsiveness there too. So just wanted to kind of share a little tips and tricks that other Sakai institutions have appreciated.
Okay. And our template, or document templates, something that we can create new ones to meet particular.
Oh, I'm afraid you cut out there a little bit, Charles.
I was just asking if we can create our own document templates that we can provide our users for particular needs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in our community, we provide kind of a base template, but you as an institution can create your own. You can also take the ones from the community and customize and tailor them further. So lots of flexibility there, Charles.
Okay, thank you.
And within this content area, actually, Joseph asked this question, so maybe we can answer it live now, around adding raw and formatted text into content. So within the Brightspace editor that we're seeing here, you can copy and paste any content that you've built in other systems like Word or PDF, and just copy that right into Brightspace, and the formatting will follow along with that as well. If you'd like to copy in just the kind of the raw content, there is a source code editor, so you could copy into the actual backend HTML code and then add in the formatting and styling that way after, once you brought in the content. So different ways that we can do that, but absolutely bring in whatever material you have into our editor or as a document.
Okay, there you go. So Scott, while you're on, if
Sure.
you could also answer, Susan Sprecher had a couple of questions, but one within content discussed by Charles, so within the content tool, can you add assessment questions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in that content tool, as Charles showed, when you click on upload and create, you have the ability to build all of your assessments, including quizzes and questions, right from within there. So, you can obviously go up to the quizzes tool if you'd like, but we've really tried to streamline that workflow of creating assessments and creating questions by allowing you to build that item right in the content area. What this also provides is that really nice lessons flow or learning path where you're having students go through the content in a logical format from top to bottom with those assessments and quizzes built right in line to that path. So again, Charles, if you could just click on upload and create, and we'll scroll down just a little bit so you can see the ability to build all of your questions and quizzes and assessments right from within this content interface.
Okay, so it sounds to me, and Charles, back me up on this, or not. It sounds to me like, as opposed to Sakai or ReggieNet, where that's a whole different function, this is actually integrating with one of the other tools in the system. And I see Scott.
That's
Scott,
exactly
you're not
right,
in your
Jim.
head at least. So okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jim.
I wanted to make sure that that's what Sakai was actually doing, because I haven't used that
Yeah.
function as much in my teaching. So
We're really trying to streamline the workflow of creating a new course. Instead of having to go to 20 different places, we're really trying to allow you to focus just in this content tool to do everything you need to build out your courses.
okay. So for our friends from D2L, I wanted to point out that Susan had a much longer and more complex question in there. So if one of you could tackle that in the Q&A tool to start with, And then maybe if you are able to address it now, we can go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. Charles, was there anything else that you wanted to show us in comparison to ReggieNet?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
Here's a question from Oscar. Is there a comparison list of items between ReggieNet, Canvas, and Brightspace? We're kind of, I've started working on kind of a not necessarily well, it's kind of a comparison, but looking for things that are different, where there might be something within ReggieNet that's not available, may or may not be available in one of the systems. And I've been kind of trying to put that together, but it's not anything that's ready to be shared, certainly. I will say that for both systems, there is in most cases, there's an analog tool between the two systems for the most part.
Yeah, and let me kind of piggyback off the top of that. The advisory committee, which is made up of faculty, both tenured, non-tenured track. We also have graduate instructors in there. We have staff, academic advisors, people like me, all of them. And we're working on a rubric that we created that has more than 100 criteria in it to evaluate these products. And a lot of them are based on, does it do this, does it do that? And so we started with what ReggieNet does, and then there are some obvious things that ReggieNet doesn't do that we think anything we're going to go out and spend money on should do, like having a mobile app, et cetera. And a lot of these were built based on people's experience as instructors, but also years of surveys that have been done on campus, both of faculty and of students. And just going out and seeing what other LMSs have advertised over the years, a wide swath of them. So in some ways, the answer to the question is that yes, it does exist, but it's in a much more complicated format. And it's being used, but it's in a much more complicated format than you might expect. So yeah, I can certainly help work with Charles, and we can try to come up with something that's a little bit more easy to view at a glance, because this is many, 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 many pages that's going on. So let's see. Mary Elaine had asked, how flexible is the gradebook as far as allowing extra credit on assignments, allowing different approaches to curving, and so on? Scott, I see you indicated you wanted to answer that one. Can you jump in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So when we're looking at the gradebook of Brightspace, there's lots of flexibility on allowing things like extra credit or even bonus on assignments. So when you're actually constructing your gradebook, you have the option for every grade item to first off choose if it actually goes to the gradebook or not. We know often with things like self-review or formative assessment that it often can overcrowd your gradebook. So you can choose which items go into the gradebook. But once they're in the gradebook, you can then set items as bonus assignments, which means they don't count towards the grade until the student has completed them. You can also easily allow your grade items to go beyond 100% if you'd like. So if you'd like to give students extra credit or bonus marks on any of the assignments, you can have them go beyond that 100%. And then as Charles showed earlier, when you're in your gradebook, for things like curving, if you need to adjust all of your grades, that spreadsheet view makes it really easy to manually override and manually enter all of your grades. So if you have a quite a built-out gradebook and you want to add 2 marks to everybody's grades, or if you need to maybe decrease their grades, those grades will automatically flow in from the assignment tools. But then if you want to adjust, you can just easily go to the spreadsheet view and then manually in those boxes override whatever the default score was.
Thank you. And there's another one here I want to look at. Oh, we had let's go ahead and I'm going to ask one of our friends from D2L to go ahead and step on the electrified third rail. Is there any sort of built-in plagiarism checker? If so, can it be turned on and off per assignment or course?
So I can take that one. So we recognize that plagiarism tools, are important, but it also is a question in an importance to the institution to decide if they want to allow those types of tools. So that's not something that Brightspace has out of the box. We allow you to evaluate your own products in that area, but I do want to reassure you that you can integrate those, all of those plagiarism tools into Brightspace. So we support integrations to all the major plagiarism tools out there. To answer the second part of that question about, can they be turned off at the course? Absolutely. So if ISU decided to, integrate Turnitin, just as an example, into Brightspace, that could be integrated into Brightspace. But then at a lower level, if an instructor of a course decided, hey, this isn't for me, I don't want to leverage that, that's a tool that can be turned off in your own specific course as well. So lots of flexibility there. Hope that answers the question.
That's great, Jake. Thank you for taking a swing at that. Really quickly, let's let our well, it doesn't have to be really quickly. Let's let our friends from D2L continue to answer some questions. I'd like to go to Jen Bethman. Jen, you've done a lot of work. For those of you who don't know Jen, by the way, who on the call, Jen does an awful lot of work behind the scenes to make the experience of pretty much everything on campus better, and not just for those who need an accommodation, but all of us, in the same way that accessibility laws make the world a little bit better for all of us. And we don't always appreciate that. So Jen, I wanted to thank you for that, but also you've done some extensive work looking at Brightspace in addition to Canvas. Can you tell us your impressions of what you found?
Yes, looking through D2L and Brightspace, I take a lot of the information through like a keyboard accessibility. I looked at with assistive technologies such as screen readers and through accessible best practices, both on the student end as well as the instructor view. I know some complaints about ReggieNet is the instructor side has often had a lacking in the accessibility realm. Having worked with the Sakai groups, they focused a lot on the student aspects before they turned their attention to the instructor. And both the instructor and student sides are on the side has a focus of accessibility. And I do know that Brightspace has talked a lot about their accessible interfaces. And as I've gone through, I've taken it through within the keyboard. There are some points that I get stuck on. So I have to look up to see what those keyboard shortcuts are. And they're not always readily available right there on the screen to tell me what those keyboard shortcuts are. They do have documentation out there. So it would be a learning curve of what do I need to do using it as a keyboard or an assistive technology user. One of the other things that they do is nice is they have the read speaker, which is a text to speech within their text editor. So when people are consuming content, they are able to have it read out to them, and if they need that in terms of a print. So that's going to help individuals who have accommodations in that realm. So that's going to be a plus. I also notice if we go to the actual editor function, we talked on previously in other sessions about the math functions. There is the ability to do the graphical equation. You can type in, latex, I can't remember how they pronounce the acronym. MathML is able to be done through their tools editor. They do also have a accessibility checker. Now the accessibility checker in this case is on the second level of the editor tool. And so you have to go looking for the accessibility tool. And that's something that we would have to really think about in terms of our training of making sure that people go and look for the accessibility tool. It's not there and available right away.
Okay, Jen, thank you. So for those of you who are in our audience today, if you have further questions about accessibility, by all means, you can put them in the Q&A section now. Jen can help answer those. And I do also want to mention just very quickly, this is not going to be a comprehensive discussion today. There's no way to do that in the time that we have. And so if you have further questions, if you go to that next lms.illinoisstate.edu website, you'll see right here in the corner, get involved, and you can submit a question or comment. And I would encourage you to do that. It'll ask you to log in. We're only taking questions and comments from people who are part of the ISU family, students and faculty and staff. And you can just type in a question. If you are interested perhaps in participating in the pilot program of testing whichever LMS we're going to pilot in the fall, this is also a great way to get a hold of us. I keep track of these and I forward these along to those who need to see them. So if you're interested in that as well. So I just wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention, if you're maybe not as experienced as you have been before, or as you are with other versions of Zoom, that you can see questions that have been answered by text on that by hitting that Q&A button and then going to the answered tab on the top of the screen. There was one question here. We had, I think, Jake, you're typing this answer right now. Is the menu bar customizable? As in, if I turn off quizzes for a course, does that heading go away?
It is customizable. I was actually just playing with that myself.
Okay.
All
right.
So you can move things around. You can delete things off the nav bar. So
very much like going into site info and moving your tools
Yep.
around or
Yep.
deleting them in ReggieNet, as we currently have that.
Jim, is it all right if I share my screen for just a second?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, I thought it might be easy to walk through both Susan and Sandeep's questions in the environment. So if it's okay, I've actually got your site pulled up as well that I'd be able to share.
Okay.
So to Susan's question about being able to create kind of that multi-part activity, it'd be Susan, I'd love to see an example of it just so I can make sure that we're replicating the same thing. But want to take a pause on that for just a second because I've got this up now and I think it's really important because I know a few folks like this question, and that's around being able to grade the same question for all students. So when you're in grading a quiz, there's 3 views you'll notice here. We have our users where we can see all the students who have completed the quiz and their score. We can go in attempt by attempt and see every attempt, the grades, and when it's been published. But you'll also see the option to grade by questions here. And there's 2 really nice functions about this. First off, when you go into any of the questions, you'll be able to see all of the students where you can see 1 at a time or up to 20 at a time because there's only 20 in this course. But I could see the correct answer and which answer each student provided on this question. So a really great way of going in and, if you have those written response or short answer questions you want to review, you can go in, just kind of stay in that same grading mode and go 1 question at a time. This feature of going into questions also allows you to update all attempts for a specific question. So if you find that your answer key is incorrect and maybe you accidentally said that C was the correct answer, but it should have been B, you can now give every student bonus points just to be nice and provide them that extra credit. Or you can say for everyone who answered B, give them that point, and then we'll update the score for all student submissions in that 1 quiz. So rather than having to go and manually edit each individual student's score, you can manage this at the entire quiz level. So that, again, when you're in your grading, is just found in the quizzes tool just under the questions here. So for grading by question or updating all of your scores by question, both options are available there. Staying in the mindset of grading, to Sandeep's question about using the annotation tools in Brightspace, whenever a student uploads a document, you'll have access to a full host of annotation tools right within the platform without having to download that student submission. As Jake mentioned, if we have something like Turnitin or other plagiarism tools integrated, you'll see the similarity score right here. But then just by simply clicking on the student's document, you can now see their document live in the platform. And this is the same experience you'd see on mobile. So if you're grading on your phone or on your tablet, you'd have this same experience to view this document live. And then right here, you have our annotation tools where I can freehand write, I can highlight specific text, I can drop in Post-it notes, I can put text on the screen, so I can really provide some nice feedback and comments to my students right in line for these annotation tools. And I mentioned the freehand writing and highlighting. So this all works with styluses. So if you have your Apple Pen or your Surface Pen, you'll be able to use those. Or if you just have your finger, you have all of this in a touch-friendly environment right in the Brightspace platform. So hopefully that answered both most of Susan and Sandeep's question. Again, Susan, for the kind of that interactive multi-part course, I'd love to see an example, and then we can try and replicate that for you.
Charles, did you have something you wanted to add to?
Yeah, actually, I just pulled up something in ReggieNet that's addresses what Susan is asking
Sure.
about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is a lessons page. Oops, I didn't hit share yet. This is a lessons page in Sakai. And so this is an embedded question. It's not coming from the tests and quizzes tool. It's an embedded question on the lessons page. And so once this is here, if I mouse over it, there's a little button, and I don't have any student submissions, but I could go through and review the student submissions. And this can actually be a graded activity. And it will send us the gradebook. And so what Susan has set up is she has lessons pages with content and a whole series of these questions embedded on the page that she can go in and grade by each question one at a time. So the question is there an analog to that within?
Go ahead, Jake.
I first of all appreciate you pulling that up so quickly. That's a really helpful visual for us to understand. I think this one might go in the category of if we could have an opportunity to mock something up and then share as just a follow-up. We would love to maybe just take a bit of time to see what we might have to support Susan's question there, if that's okay.
Sure, that's certainly possible. We'll get you in contact with Susan, and of course, there's always going to be some research and follow-up in this whole process. So as we learn answers, we will explore ways of sharing that with our campus community. Jake, I think you answered this one earlier, and I feel like this is one that we probably should talk about live, which is the frequency of updates for the product. We had a similar question with the one earlier this week, and I can share with you that I think in part because D2L is a name that's been around for a long time, for those of us who've been teaching for a long time, that there is some sense, I think inappropriately so, or perhaps mistakenly so, but naturally so, that it's an old product and it hasn't changed a lot. But you guys actually do updates rather frequently, and the Brightspace version is kind of new too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that's D2L is really proud of is the fact that while we've been around in the market for 22 years now, that we've over that time in working with our institutional partners been able to keep up with the modern kind of user expectations on the user interface front, but also consistently upgrading our backend architecture as well. So, if you were to kind of look back maybe 7 years ago, what you would have seen in Brightspace would have been very dramatically different. We went on a big journey at that point to say, what do we want the next evolution of the Brightspace LMS to look like? And that's what you can see today is that fully mobile responsive, really easy to use, very clean and modern looking user interface. But on the back end, we're also a native SaaS cloud environment as well. And the thing that I think is really important and that some of our institutional partners have valued is that, so for some of our clients that have been with us for 20 some odd years, they've never had to migrate to a new system. So we've gone through all of those changes without having to, force them into a new system and redo integrations and change management and learn new workflows. And then to the other part of that question, Jim, just about the frequency of updates. So because we are now a SaaS and native cloud platform, every single month, you'll get a new version upgrade of Brightspace. That comes with zero downtime, zero maintenance. So for all of your users of the system, they won't even know at that point. It's entirely seamless. And then you as an institution have the ability to say, hey, we're ready for this new feature to be turned on. We don't force those changes onto you as an institution. Does that help answer the question, Jim?
Yes, I think very much so. That was what we were looking for. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
We're still getting some questions in, so this is great. Please keep them coming. We have about 15 minutes or so. I'll have to do a little housekeeping at the end, of course.
Sure.
Roll the credits, all that other stuff. I did have one question, and I think, Scott, this might be one that, yeah, you said that you're willing to answer it. I'm going to reframe it a little bit. So the question itself is, are there options for getting notifications when a quiz, assignment, et cetera, has been submitted, similar to ReggieNet with Digest, Individual, None? Scott, could you show us also, as part of that, maybe one thing we've surveyed students recently in the context of, we're changing ReggieNet. What do you want to see differently? What do you like? We asked, but what do you want to see that's different? And app is number one. We've already addressed that. But the other thing is having one central location where all of their due dates are at. Can you, in the context of answering that question from one of our attendees, can you also show us that a little bit, please?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's nice. They both kind of fit together really well. And we surface both of those responses through those widgets. So Charles talked about these really nice homepage elements that present really important components of the platform. Just want to make sure everyone see my screen, right? I don't have the green box, so it's throwing me off. But first off, from the instructor experience and looking at those new submissions and notifications when there's a quiz or an assignment or a discussion that's been submitted by one of your students. There's configurations in all of those tools to send you an email when a new student submission has come through. But we've also got this really great homepage widget called Quick Eval that will automatically surface any new submission from any course that you're teaching. So right when you sign in as an instructor, you can see right here on every course I'm teaching and every assignment I have available, where there's a new submission, the number of submissions based on this little identifier, the number here. And this also gives me one-click access to start my grading. So not only can I see those items, but as I showed before, if I just click on the Poetry Slam, right from the homepage in one click, I can start grading that assignment. So you can get those notifications as email, or you can just quickly and easily see that right when you sign in to the Brightspace homepage. Again, I just wanted to reinforce this does come from every course, so there's nothing you need to set up. As long as you have an active course with some assessments in it, your student work will just start showing up here. Now, from that student perspective, if we switch into our student role here, you'll notice that widget of Quick Eval quickly changes over to Work to Do. So we have these contextual elements in the homepage of Brightspace that surface information relevant to the user that's looking at it. So as an example, now that I'm in as a student, and to Jim's question, I can now see all of my upcoming due dates across every course, across every content item. So I can see here as a student, I'm a little late. I've got a bunch of overdue assignments, so it's letting me go into those past items. But if I wanted to click on View All Work, again, this pulls in all of my due dates across every course, whether they be assignments or content items or discussion boards. Anything that's in my calendar is presented here, and I can just in one click start into that activity. So much like the instructor experience, for students when they first sign into the homepage, they have one-click access to all of their upcoming items and help them really easily manage their time and what they have to work on.
Thank you. Sandeep had asked another question too, and I get to try this word. In creating assignments, quizzes for my quantitative class, is there a possibility to set up algorithmic questions? In other words, did I do all right on that one? I think it wasn't bad.
It sounded good to me.
I have 3 degrees in communication, so and not the numbers kind either. More the cuddly fuzzy kind. In other words, different numbers for the same formulas.
Yep, absolutely. So there's 2 question types we have that support this. When I'm in creating a new quiz and I go to my question types, we have both arithmetic and significant figure based questions that essentially allow you to build out the formula and set the variables and the tolerance range for the answer. So when you're building out your variables, you can set the kind of the minimum and the maximum values, and Brightspace will automatically generate new values for each student. And then when you're setting up the grading, you can set tolerance levels as well to say they need to be within a certain percentage point or certain decimal point in order for the system to automatically grade those as correct or incorrect.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We had a follow-up on that download all files option. Can you batch upload annotated graded files back into that assignment when you're done with them? That's a fairly standard thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I shouldn't have stopped sharing. But yes,
right.
Absolutely. When you, this is really great from an accessibility perspective as well for any instructors who have accessibility requirements. When you're in grading an assignment, we'll look at, say, our Poetry Slam again. I can download all my student submissions. Oops, we'll go back to, I apologize there, we'll go back to users. So in one click, I can download all student submissions and it will bundle them all up into a zip package for me. And then within that zip package, there will be a folder for each student containing all of their submitted documents. So if you want to grade offline and maybe use track changes or Word to provide that feedback, you can then simply bulk upload that zip file back into Brightspace, and it will align all of those annotated and updated documents to the student feedback. So then you can provide some additional context if you'd like, but it gives you that really nice simplified workflow for uploading all of those documents in one step.
Great, thank you. Well, I see we have a couple more questions that we're going to ask our friends from Brightspace to answer. Actually, I see mainly one more. Before we do that, though, Charles, is there anything else that we have about 10 minutes left? Is there anything else that you, or I'll also open it up to you, Jen, from an ISU perspective that you wanted to add? If not, you can just give me a thumbs up or whatever. Seems like we're pretty good. Okay. Well, so before I do the closing spiel, let's go ahead and Jake, I think you have indicated you'd like to answer this question. Do you have any success stories you could share of a campus migrating from Sakai to Brightspace? And I think migrating, I'm going to take the liberty of reinterpreting that a little bit. I think it's two different things. Migrating means adopting a new system, but it also means getting our data out of the old one to the new one. So Jake, if you or anyone wants to talk a little bit about that process, and then Charles, you and me and Jen, maybe we can weigh in on that as well. Because in some ways, and I don't mean to minimize all the great things that we've heard about Brightspace today or all the great things we heard about Canvas before, in some ways, picking the LMS is only half the story. It's how do we get our stuff out of the old one into the new one? And Sakai being what it is not, that may be a little bit more of a heavy lift. So who wants to take that? I'll just jump in.
Sure, I can take it, Jim. And you've done an awesome job moderating this session, by the way. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
So a few institutions that I'll just share that have successfully gone through the transition from Sakai to Brightspace, just kind of around you folks. So a few that made the leap last year were the University of Rhode Island, the University of Indianapolis, and both, while I think they're of similar size, may not be as large as ISU, made the transition from Sakai to Brightspace in a fairly short period of time. Generally, I think both those institutions were kind of 3 to 6 months in terms of their implementation timeframe. And that also included migrating all of their course materials from Sakai to Brightspace. But one that I'll just mention that is pretty notable is New York University went through a very similar process to what you're going through right now, and selected Brightspace as their next generation LMS. And so they successfully migrated their, I think, 55,000 students from Sakai to Brightspace in about 9 months. Just more importantly, in terms of the migration, because I'm sure lots of the folks on this call are saying, hey, I've invested so much time into my course in Sakai, what's going to happen with that? Well, what we ended up working with NYU on is really ensuring a high fidelity course migration experience from Sakai into Brightspace. So we really worked with them to customize our conversion tool to make sure that that was as seamless as possible. So things like, your gradebook, your course files, all of your quiz questions and the different situations that can come up with that, all migrated from Sakai to Brightspace for those folks. And that's something that, ISU would obviously be benefit of now that we've made a lot of those investments as well. We'd be happy to partner with you folks in just improving that experience as well in terms of migration. And then I think we're also chatting about some of the other D2L partners that we have in terms of migration, but I hope that was helpful, at least as an answer.
Very much so. And our colleague, Dave Hyland, who is the project manager for the whole next LMS thing. So Dave's been in contact with a lot of people, and he's been setting up meetings for the leadership team for the next LMS project to actually talk to some of these institutions. what a lot of people don't realize, I didn't actually realize, this is the first time in a long time I've been part of a big change like this. Companies like Brightspace and their competitors have references, just like if you were interviewing for a job. And so we're talking to some of the references and seeing how we do that. It's a great way to deep dive into it. So even though some of the folks in our audience, some of the faculty members or even students who may be watching aren't directly part of those conversations, rest assured that we are probing into that, those things as well. We're getting information from a lot of different places, and we're going to make the most informed decision that we can, and weighing a lot of factors. Like I said, a rubric with more than 100 standards and criteria. So let me take a look here. We have a couple more minutes, and we have a couple more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Jim, if I may, I'd like to emphasize that what Jim said about, selecting the system is probably even the easy part. The migration is going to be the hard part. And one of the things we'd like to emphasize is that everybody involved in this project is cognizant of the burden that this could potentially place on faculty. And it is our intent and our hope, and we will strive to do this, to make that burden as low as possible for our instructors. The process of going through the migration, we'll do some test migrations to see if things are working the way we want them to, and if not, then we'll see about getting things tweaked so that once we do the actual final migration, that things will come across as smoothly and as what's the word I'm looking with as much fidelity as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And then we also intend to have as much support in place as necessary to assist faculty that might need to do some tweaking later on. So again, we're very cognizant, and administration is cognizant of this process needing to be done as well as we possibly can.
And I'll just piggyback on that very quickly as I segue into wrapping up our wonderful session today. Charles and I were in a meeting this morning where this point was reinforced, and without going into a lot of details and everything else, they don't let me touch the money. I don't know how much any of this costs, but this project is much better funded than the project that brought ReggieNet to our campus. There are student fees that support learning now that weren't in place before on our campus 12 years ago, and so those are things too. So we are, as a communication person especially, I'm cognizant that those of you who were instructors here 10 years ago when we brought aboard Sakai, one of the concerns about Sakai was that it was an open source platform and it was chosen because it was the least expensive one. I don't think that's entirely the case, but there is a financial commitment to doing this transition right this time, I guess is the best way to put it. Again, let's take away any of the hard work of what has come before, but sometimes we do need to acknowledge that elephant in the room. So having done that, now, and I would also mention to my friends, our friends at D2L Brightspace, we don't have an unlimited bank account either. So, keep that in mind. Anyway, one more time, I want to remind you, go to nextlms.illinoisstate.edu. If you have more questions for us, we are answering these as they come in. Click on submit a question. We will have the recording and some other materials, including some other demonstration videos from our two candidate vendors, linked to this page within a couple of days. And we have about, I can give someone from D2L about a minute, maybe a little bit less, if you have any final thoughts. Ashley, we haven't heard a lot from you, but we appreciate your support here today. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Just really want to thank you all for the opportunity. We've enjoyed spending time with you all and investing in the process, and just being able to showcase D2L Brightspace, and hopefully it meets all of your needs, and we're happy to support in whatever capacity we can.
Awesome. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you to those of you who participated today. We had, I don't know what we got up to in terms of total numbers, but I've seen people coming in and out. And again, we will try to have the recording of this up as soon as possible. Keep an eye on your campus email, especially if you're faculty and staff, or keep an eye on the university's flagship social media accounts. We'll be posting updates on this project as it matures, and we will be reaching out to people and let you know what's going on. And again, your feedback is always welcome. So with that, we're going to end today's session. I actually have to keep it going for a couple minutes because I have to go in. I want to get all the great questions and answers and copy and paste those out of the system. So everyone else, you're welcome to head out. Thank you again. Have a good weekend. Have a good into your spring semester, and we'll talk to you soon.